today we're going to be covering Alice and Bob notation and cryptographic goals. If you have any questions during this session, please do let me know, and then we can get started. Let me just start by showing my screen. So this would be this one. And then if anyone can let me know if they can actually see my screen, that would be great. Awesome. Okay, cool. So let's get started. So, what is Alice and Bob notation? Well, when we have cybersecurity protocols, we want to be able to more sort of like put them as a notation in an easy way. This notation is called the oh, I've already forgotten the Dolev-Yao model. It's a model that was produced by two people, um, with their surnames being Dolev and Yao. Um, so yeah, it's a easy way for us to actually write down models rather than having to write them in plain English. So usually we have a few terms that we would refer to as. So when we talk about A, we usually call this A Alice. So this is like the first party within a protocol. We also have B, which is for Bob, which is the second party. So throughout these protocols, you'll be able to see that A and B are trying to communicate with each other. And you will also have E, or Elvis, which here is our attacker. Obviously, you can have various different names and various different letter combinations. I always thought it was Eve. Oh, I'm just using whatever was in the slides. You can name it whatever. Like this could be like Ayush. This could be like I don't know who's got a letter. Uh, Who's got their name with starting with B? I don't know. Hmm. Bob. Well, obviously, like they're from us lot. Who has a name beginning with B? I don't even know. But yeah, you get the idea, right? It can be anything. Um, and then these two are our normal trusted parties. Beijing is crazy. Okay. Also, if you guys are confused what I'm on about, I'm reading the chat. That's in the live for Taxiland. So yeah. Okay, cool. So now we know that we have these three parties. We have a trusted parties, and then we have the attacker party, or also known as the adversary. I guess we can start to show you some of the different notations. So first of all, let's say Alice wants to send a message to Bob. Um, this is how you would have it in this notation. This is how the $Yao notation will work. So firstly, we show the first party, and then we show that it's sending a message to the next party. So here it's B. So Alice is sending something to B, and then the message is right here. And you can see it's a text message. Quite simple. So yeah, we'll just do source DST, then MSG. Cool. Now after that, um, let's bring in Elvis into the play. So obviously Elvis is our attacker, right? A and B, Alice and Bob do not know about Elvis. They don't know about this attacker. But Elvis can act as if he's Alice and send a message to Bob, right? So here, E or Elvis is impersonating A, right? Cool. Now, obviously, we don't want this to be happening, right? As you can see, Elvis is just impersonating A and is just sending a message to B. But then how will we be able to know, at least how would B be able to know that it's A, and how would A be able to know that it's B, right? They can assume that an attacker exists because they're paranoid. Crazy how white-centric names are used in math problems are. Cool. So let's say, for example, in order to sort of prevent this from happening, we can use one of the different techniques of encryption. One of these, let's say symmetric encryption, right? Now, in the de Levial model, or the notation we use within the security and networks module, we usually show symmetric encryption like this. So this symmetric encryption, as you can see, we firstly have curly braces around our message to show that it's been encrypted, and then this small text over here, KAB, this is the session key. um, that is produced from symmetric encryption. So we usually have some sort of key establishment protocol, right? Like Diffie-Hellman, for example, which allows us to produce a symmetric key that both A and B can use. So this is cool, right? But what if, let's say, if Elvis is able to um, sort of get a hold of this message, then Elvis can actually intercept this message and act like Elvis is A, and then for B, they don't really care. At least here, when we get this message, all B knows is that it thinks it's receiving a message from A, and its only way, at least right now, of verifying the message is by decrypting it and expecting the message to be somewhat legible, right? And here, obviously, because we're sending this same thing that we got by intercepting the message between A and B, essentially we're able to replay this. And so for B, for Bob, it will look like Elvis is actually Alice. This is what's known as a replay attack. Okay? So this replay attack, essentially, we send a message that's already been sort of trying to be sent to the intended recipient, but if we can intercept this, as long as there's no sort of other way of verifying, we can then sort of act as if we're the sender. So how can we actually solve this issue? Well, there is actually a way. We can use nonces. So nonces are numbers that I only used once. They're unique numbers, right? So this basically, if we put this next to um, if we put this next to our what's it called? Like our message, we're able to then um, be able to introduce some sort of challenge response protocol um, in order to sort of firstly check that it's not that our message isn't being replayed. And we can show this by having a look at this one. So let's think about it. Um, so first of all, let's say Alice wants to communicate with Bob. First of all, a good thing to do in these sort of protocols is identify yourself. Because technically, we'd actually know, um, or B wouldn't actually know once they receive a message that it's A. They can't confirm it's A. So they send an identifier to say, okay, yo, look, I'm Alice. Then B will look at this and be like, okay, this person's Alice. So I'm going to test to see if this person's actually Alice. So they have a nonce. This is what a nonce looks like. This is a nonce that's being sent to A. And this is encrypted through through a session key that's from symmetric encryption. Alice and Bowen, is not is it not NA is the nonce generated by A conventionally? Um, See, I thought that until I looked at the slides, and this is what came up. So I think here it's this is what was in the slides. So yeah. You know what? We can actually have a look. Hold up. Let's have a look. Because Needham Schroeder slides it's the other way around. Yeah, that's interesting. Where is security and networks? Modules. Hmm. Maybe there's a mistake in the slides. Okay, cool. Let's replace it then. So NB is a nonce sent by Bob to A, and this is encrypted through symmetric encryption. And essentially, the point of this is that the person who claims to be A right here, we want to ensure that they are who they say they are. And so if they are truly A, then that means they firstly should have the session key to be able to decrypt NB. And then if they can modify that NB, let's say by doing NB plus one or some other computation, this shows that they're actually A. So we can do this like so. So I can now say NB and then plus one. So let's say we've done this sort of computation that proves that we're A. And then we'll also send this as a symmetrically encrypted message. And then once we've done that, we can then also send a message alongside with our request, which is like, let's say, just some random message. And then obviously this would also be encrypted using the session key between A and B. Now you might be wondering, well, surely Elvis can take this, right, and act as a man in the middle. Um, and truth is, Elvis actually can do that. Um, because essentially, if this is interpreted, we can just replay this. No, he can't because the message is encrypted too. He can't replay the encrypted message. The one you sent on WhatsApp earlier was the message was decrypted. What do you mean? So nonces are used to establish session key. Yeah, check if someone has access to the session key. One sec. Oh, actually, you're right. Never mind. I think what you were referring to is if both are joined, in which case then you would be correct. So just for the video, we had a comment from Shay, um, who was saying that the message was encrypted, so you can't actually replay it. You can actually replay it since obviously we can just send this whole thing back. But there's another part which I'll show you later on, where we have NB plus one and the message combined within one curly brace, such that it makes it so that, oh, one sec. Okay, apologies for that. Um, okay, so let's also address, firstly, we'll address what we were talking about, and then I'll address Hux's question. So MB plus one, when we combine these together, it makes it so that we can't actually use it within the replay attack. We can't actually change our message. We can't reuse this in a replay attack, which I'll be showing later on. But yeah, let's see. So Huck says, so nonces are used to establish session key. So that's one thing, yeah. So you can use the nonces within Diffie-Hellman or whatever encryption method you're using. Check if someone has access to the session key. Um, let's see. So checking if someone has access to the session key. Well, I guess yes, in a sense, but obviously it depends because obviously here we can just replay. Oh, that's terrible. Yeah. Here we can just replay this and we don't actually have the key, but we can still um, sort of respond to the challenge in this challenge response protocol, right? So the only way a nonce would be able to use technically is if these two are joined together, which I will go on to later. Why would you need to do this if you already have an established session key? So like I mentioned, if we're using something like this, then it is hard for like the attacker can literally just get your message, and then other than that, you won't know that the person who's trying to talk to you is actually who you say they are. So it's kind of one way of formally like being like, okay, this person has the session key. But obviously we've shown that it might not always work. Um, so yeah. From my understanding, it's a verification thing that allows A to check B is active without actually sending any messages. Far end operative, at least in this context. I think that is, yeah. Far end operative, um, just for the viewers, is basically when A knows that B is currently active. Um, so yeah, with that, you can have A send B a nonce, and B would respond and sign it immediately. That is what you would define as far end operative. I'll go into that a bit later as well. But yeah, let's move on. So yeah, like we said, this can be replayed. And I can show you one method of that. Now, this is called a reflection attack, this thing that I'm about to show you. So basically, what we can do is this. Let's say that we have A who wants to communicate with B, but E is in the middle of the two. So our E, or Elvis, is basically the man in the middle. Right? So this person, Elvis, is trying to intercept these messages between A and B. So let's do this. A will send something to B, and that would be the identity, first of all. So A is basically saying to B, okay, look, I'm A. Then B will be like, okay, prove it, by solving my challenge response protocol, in which we send this nonce encrypted with the session key that A should theoretically have, and A will be like, okay, perfect, and send it back, obviously. But throughout this, remember, we're saying that Elvis is the one who's intercepting these messages, right? Well, actually, I've missed something for the plus one. Yeah. So this is just a thing to show that we've solved the computation that B is requested, and this is done there. And obviously, let's say that once we've done that, we want to send the message, right? Now, if E is the man in the middle, E can change the request um, at any time. E can basically be in the middle and act like it's B, but the identity will be different. So let's say that Alice wants to pay Bob something. Like let's say Alice wants to pay Bob like £5, right? Like maybe they've gone to Starbucks or something and Alice owes Bob money. So when E is in the middle, E will be able to um, act as Bob. So when A tries to send the message to pay Bob $5, it will actually come out as paying Elvis $5 since the identity is of Elvis that's being shown to Alice. So whatever identity um, Elvis has is basically, so here essentially Elvis is impersonating Bob when communicating to A, and Elvis is impersonating A when communicating to Bob. So that's essentially the whole point of MITM. What week is this content in specific? This content is week 5, lecture 2. Cool. So yeah, essentially, now this means that we can say pay Elvis 5. So then when it actually comes to this, you might be wondering, well, okay, we've done this, right? So Elvis will now set up another sort of session. So this is going to be our session 1, right? So we have this session 1, and basically we have this. So then we'll do the same thing again. So A is trying to send a message to B. We have A. A is saying, okay, look, I'm Alice. B is sending a message to A. And this time we have NB again, but we'll call it 2. Obviously, because a number is only used once, we have the second nonce. So these NBs cannot be the same. And to show this, we can use the number 2. Cool. Now, when we do this again, obviously, it'll be the same thing. We show that we are A. So A will show that they are A by doing NB2 plus 1, right? Okay, that is actually terrible handwriting. Hold up. NB2 and then plus 1. There we go. And then KAB to show that it's been symmetrically encrypted. And then let's say they actually want to pay Bob now, right? So now we see that they want to pay Bob. But obviously, what Elvis can do now, given that the symmetric key encryption, given that this session key is the same, Elvis can take this, and remember, Elvis is still the man in the middle here, intercepting all of these messages. So Elvis can take that, and also take this. Remember, this is a fresh, or what we call a new nonce, and this has been responded to. So Elvis can take these two things and concatenate them or join them together. Let me go back to the pen. So we join the new nonce and the message from before. So obviously here is the message, and then obviously this is the fresh nonce. And then Elvis, who's impersonating as A, will send this message to B, which he has intercepted. And remember, this whole time when I do A, B, B to A, B, B to A, remember that Elvis is going to be within all of the middles of these. Like Elvis is going to be in the middle, in like that arrow, like right here. Elvis would be here, like sending those messages back to B and so forth. If you did the security and networks, I think it was the first assignment or the second assignment. I think it might have been the second assignment. I'm not too sure, but in one of the first or second assignments, this was actually the solution. Um, so by doing this reflection attack. So yeah, Elvis will impersonate A and send this message to B, where we have NB2 plus 1. Let me just close this. And then KAB. And then this is a comma. And then pay Elvis 5. And then KAB. So assuming that the session key doesn't change, Elvis can then manipulate the messages to look as if Alice wants to send Elvis 5, and then B will be like, okay, and send Elvis £5, which is not what's intended, and hence we've completed this reflection attack. So to summarize what an reflection attack is basically you have session 1 and session 2, and we extract something from this session, kind of like a reflection, and use it to achieve our purpose and pass our authentication. But obviously, we can avoid this by combining these two such that Elvis will not be able to sort of take what he wants from the actual sort of, what's it called? The protocol. So to avoid, well, actually, let me write it in text. Oh, that is so small. Oh, I don't think it's going to get any bigger than that. Okay, well, that works. To avoid this, let me just like, yeah, to avoid this reflection attack, Elvis, well, no, the nonce and message are combined together, so Elvis cannot take parts of the message and replay it. Cool. Seems like there's no questions, so I'll move on. So now we've seen the whole point of this sort of symmetric encryption and how we can actually do this, how we can write it in this notation. And one thing that symmetric encryption requires is a key establishment protocol. So without this key establishment protocol, we wouldn't actually be able to sort of like encrypt these messages with the actual session keys. We wouldn't have those session keys to use, so we wouldn't be able to do that without the key establishment protocol. Now, there's two ways in which you can have this sort of key establishment protocol. So the first way is by securely communicating through the use of public keys. So that's going back to asymmetric encryption. And this works because only one party will have one private key, whereas everyone else will be able to encrypt using the public key. So no one can actually decrypt the messages between the parties. Or you can use a trusted third party as well. So you can go to some third party that's trusted between both A and B, and then we can have a look as well if we want to actually exchange the keys. But then what if we don't actually have the public keys, right? Well, we have certificates, right? So usually we trust these certificates and we can check for these certificates to see if we actually do trust them. So by using certificates which contain obviously the identity, the issuer name, and the public key, we are able to securely identify the identity and public key as well. Obviously, this won't work with things like self-signed um, certificates if you don't actually check them during when you do TLS and when you do your transport layer security protocol. But that's another issue, which we won't address today. Cool. So I'm gonna now move on. So another property that we should have within our protocols is something that's called forward encryption. Sorry, forward secrecy. So what is forward secrecy? Can anyone in the chat tell me? Does anyone know? Even if a key is compromised, all previous sessions should be safe. Uh, is it even if a key is compromised? Because if a key is compromised, the sessions wouldn't be safe, right? But yeah, it's to do with having a long-term key that that isn't able to be sort of taken, even if we have a long-term recording of the protocol, right? So if we if a if an attacker, let's say, has a long-term recording of the protocol, let me move this to the side. We can keep the messages secret from the attacker. I.e., they can't access the long. They can't access the long-term keys of the protocol. So essentially, this is good because it allows, let's say, if we have a record of all the conversations between A and B that are encrypted, we wouldn't actually be able to decrypt these even after the protocol. Because let's say Alice is sending some really important document to Bob that can never be exposed. The best way to keep it safe would be using forward secrecy by having some sort of keys that will keep the session safe, even if we have these sort of records, right? Now, how can we keep a key good then? That brings that question. So how do we keep a key good? So let's think about it. What defines a good key? First of all, that if it's fresh, which just means it's new, um, and this is good because old keys are more likely to have been cracked slash exposed due to the time um, that has been elapsed between that key and the current sort of message, protocol, transaction, or whatever that we're doing. And the second one is that the key is exclusive. So for key to be exclusive, it means that the key is only known to the trusted parties within the protocol. So that means that any adversary do not know the key. So this allows us to then actually prevent the sort of reverse engineering of this key and then being able to get access of the messages that someone may have used. Now, in order to also verify the identity, long-term key .env added. But yeah, no. In order to identify who's actually talking to us as well, which is another problem that we mentioned beforehand. We want to be able to identify who's talking to who, and ensure that the intended recipient is the intended recipient and the sender is actually who we think they are. We need some sort of way to do that, right? So, and one way which we can do the sort of identity check is called once authentication, and it um, allows us to identify like the um, the person who we are talking to, and this can be done by let's say A and B are communicating, and A wants to know that B is who they say they are. B can send a signed message to A containing the identity of A. Actually, let me do this. Okay, this. So B can send this signed message to A. So this S underscore B actually usually looks like this. S, B, and then A. But obviously I can't do that with this text, so I'll do it like this. So we sign the message in order to show that A actually knows that it's going to be B, because A can decrypt the message using the public key. And you wouldn't be able to do that with anyone else's, because only B would be able to have the private key in order to sign um, this message. But it doesn't actually show that B is currently active. It could be that maybe B is a bot. B stands for bot, not Bob. So in order to show that they're currently active, we have this thing that Shay mentioned in the chat earlier called far end operative. Now, this far end operative will allow us to check if the person who we are talking to is currently active in communication. And we can do this as follows. So let's see. So A can send a nonce that's fresh to B, and then B must be able to sign this nonce immediately. So this means that through this challenge response protocol allows us to show that B is currently active as the nonce is sort of being acted upon. And this nonce is fresh as well, which shows that it's new. So it allows us to then say, okay, cool. B's actually responded with the correct information in the small amount of time, because obviously B has to respond immediately. So that's how we can then identify that B is currently active in communicating with us. And on the one hand, this is good because obviously we can check that, but it doesn't confirm the identity of B. And hence anyone can actually check and use this in a replay response in a man-in-the-middle attack. So essentially, we can just combine these things in this thing called entity authentication. And entity authentication is basically just a combination of this. So it's the combination of once, off, and far, and operative. And basically, we send the nonce to B, and B must respond and must send the nonce as well. And in this way, we're combining both of the attributes of the two things, the once authentication and the far end operative, in order to produce this entity authentication. And so it essentially gives us a good solution to check that, firstly, the identity of who we're trying to speak to, and also if they're currently active in communication. Cool. And when we combine the other thing as well, a good key, when we combine a good key and entity authentication, we actually are able to then have mutual belief in the key. So because of this mutual belief in the key, we're then able to say, okay, cool. Alice and Bob will both trust each other within this protocol, and this allows for a protocol to be good and secure. Cool. And then I think that's about basically what I wanted to cover for today. So we've covered some of the notation within these sort of protocols. And we've gone through what makes for a good sort of cryptographic transaction or the cryptographic goals. Yeah, so just a quick summary. Firstly, from any cryptographic transaction, we want to be able to send a message from A to B, and we want to confirm that B is the intended recipient and no one else. We want to be able to confirm that from B's perspective, that it's A who actually sent the message. We want to be able to confirm that sort of that A can't deny that they sent the message. Um, and yeah, those are, in a nutshell, those are the things that we want to do with these sorts of cryptographic transactions that we do over the internet in order to ensure that we're not being targeted by adversaries and nothing actually goes wrong when we communicate over the network. So, yeah. I think that is it for today, guys. I'll put these sort of drawings and whatever onto the recaps. But yeah, hopefully this was a good session. Um, cool. Anyways, if you found this useful, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And also ping the notification bell and to watch more videos like this. See ya.